Meeting.
You want to call for public comment? Doesn't matter.
Let's go.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting. I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as have been distributed, and any deletions, additions, or corrections. Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, so ordered. And now we will do public comment. We're a little disjointed today because this is the first, at least in my history, that we've had prison board meeting here at the courthouse. But because of COVID, the restrictions down there are such that we felt that might be better to have it here. And we had our first meeting last Thursday in public here, and so we felt it was, logical to open it up for, public meeting here. And I know the city had done that a month before us. So we're starting to open up things, and that's why we're here. And we will be going back as soon as is reasonable, or till we have to, by law, make a decision whether we go back to Zoom or quarterly meetings are the minimum requirement at the courthouse by statute. So with all that said, welcome everyone. And is there any public comment before we start? Okay, if not, then we will ask for a report.
I was going to say, are they with PrimeCare or? Oh, okay.
Observers. I do have a couple questions, but I was going to ask them at the end.
No, the public comment is at the beginning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Could you come to this chair so I can hear better? I'm sorry, my hearing's a little off. Thank you.
I certainly can.
And would you, it's customary that we introduce ourselves and what township or part of the county we're from.
Sure. My name is Beth Amino, and I live in Lebanon City.
Okay, good.
So I just have some random questions. The first one is, when you send urine tests out to be drug tested, what lab do you use?
Honestly, I don't know the name on the top of my head. I can get you that information.
I'd appreciate that.
Have you emailed me prior?
I have.
Okay, so you would be.
Should I email you again?
If you don't mind, and then I can get you the lab name.
And then also the who owns that lab. I'm interested in knowing.
Okay.
And then my second question is.
Is that a right to know?
Well, I think that you can get the name of the lab. Maybe she could find out then who owns it.
Okay.
I'm not sure that is something that you would get involved in.
Okay.
I mean, that would, once you know who the lab is, then you can do that.
If there's a conflict of interest, though, that's what I'm just.
In finding out that information?
I'm concerned there might be a conflict of interest. That's
Well,
why.
I mean,
On which end?
But that's okay. That's fine, and then I'll go from there, and
Yeah.
then I can always come back next month and ask my question again. So okay. And then my second question is: besides COVID, do you deal with any other infectious diseases that could spread within your population at the jail?
Mm-hmm.
We're really focused on COVID, but are there any other ones that you guys are struggling with?
PrimeCare, the president, Tom, would you like to?
Sure.
And would you introduce yourself?
I'm Tom Weber, CEO of PrimeCare Medical. We're the contracted medical provider out at the facility. Numerous infectious diseases can make their way into a facility. We do questioning on intake as to whether anyone wants an HIV test, hepatitis tests we will perform as well. We have chronic care plans to address those diseases. We do surveillance for MRSA, and we'll quarantine and treat if there's an outbreak of active MRSA. Our pandemic plan for COVID was sprung from our plan when the flu outbreak in 2009 came around. So we do surveillance and offer vaccines for the flu each and every year for anyone who's willing to take it. So any type of infectious disease that you could get in the community can also be received and transmitted in a correctional facility.
And so is it a problem? Is it something that's...
Speaking of, I mean, it's a problem that we want to make sure that we don't have a large outbreak. But other than influenza and COVID, they tend to be more isolated occurrences and don't have transmission within the facility itself.
Okay.
Unless you have a hepatitis A outbreak, which I can describe how that happens, but it's almost lunchtime. I don't want to ruin anyone's lunch.
Have you had any recent outbreak of MRSA?
No, I think we just came from a quarterly meeting. We had 0 cases in April, 2 cases in May, and 0 cases in June.
Okay, great, thanks. And then my other thing is just kind of a question. So I've been studying this a little bit, and but I'm super ignorant on it, so you're definitely the expert. But I didn't realize before that, you know, in all prisons, contraband is a huge issue. And as I've been looking at it, it seems to me that most of the contraband gets in through outmate, people going out for work. And other cities around here have separated their facilities. They have a separate facility, physically distanced facility for the outmates and the inmates. And I was wondering if that is something that was ever looked at here in Lebanon County, and I mean, and if that would be something feasible.
Interpret outmate for me. What do you mean?
Work release.
Work release.
Am
I using the wrong term?
Yeah,
Sorry.
work release.
Work release is primarily how a lot of the contraband comes into the
Yes,
prison.
which we haven't had for over a year. We haven't had work release for over a year.
I understand that.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you knew. You said you're new to this, so I'm trying to...
Yeah, no,
It's cost prohibitive to build and run 2 different facilities, but they are segregated in the prison, is my understanding. Am I correct?
You're correct in an ideal situation. In our facility, sometimes our housing has to be shared with non-work release people, which is why we have policies and procedures in place such as strip searches, et cetera, like security protocols we take to try and make sure that somebody that's going out to the community to work doesn't bring something back into the facility.
but even with your best efforts, it's always a problem.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, that's common in all
It
facilities.
is,
but
yes.
Yes.
It's not just this facility here.
Yes.
I just had come to realize that, like Lancaster, for example, the way that they've tried to deal with that, from my understanding, is they have the outmate people staying in a separate facility where, say, laundry and the kitchen staff and the food and things like that aren't intermingled. I'm wondering in the bigger picture how much more it ends up costing us as a community when, like, drug addictions and stuff like that continue, or like it's just kind of propagating criminal behavior inside the prison. Like, I don't know a lot about it, but I'm just curious how, like, I realize it would cost money to build the facility or to separate them physically, but in the bigger picture, if it's something that maybe we should look at, that it might end up being
Our
better.
population is dropping. It's less than 300 right now.
I saw that
It
on
would
the
be
website.
really cost
Yeah.
prohibitive, in my opinion, to build a second facility, staff it, and, you know, all the regulations that go with that. We have the facility that we can do this.
I think,
Just to interject, I'm the Deputy Warden of Operations. You're right, the building itself is not overly conducive because everybody's in the same building. However, just by eliminating that building, you're still gonna have multiple conduits of contraband. So any jail or any jailer that tells you they don't have a drug problem is lying, because there's always a method. And the inmate, unfortunately, who has that addiction will do whatever they can, and there's other ways that they can get the contraband in. So that's only, the work release is the most visible, but it's certainly not the only one. So there's other conduits, and they're a lot more than you may think. So.
I mean, the mail is one.
well, we don't want to
No,
identify
I
that to the
understand.
public.
Pardon?
I don't think we want to identify those that aren't visible.
I think there are newspaper articles on that.
Okay, take a chance.
Yeah, and I think, a while ago, even before COVID, I had contacted Joe Ellen as a citizen just to ask some questions about this, probably 2 years ago at this point, so we had discussed it. Anyway, okay, those are my questions for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
We'll go on to the report. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I was going to ask this question at the end, but I'll ask it now since we're sort of on the topic of work release. I was going to ask, has there been any contemplation of restarting work release now that we're getting more of a better handle on COVID in terms of vaccinated population and whatnot?
We network with PrimeCare, a medical provider. We actually had a meeting this morning before this one. We evaluate and reevaluate and try and come up with a safe plan to be able to accommodate. At this time, we're not able to have a safe plan that's not going to protect the incarcerated population in its entirety. So we keep evaluating, talking to PrimeCare, seeing the statistics, seeing where we're at to see if we can develop a safe way to do that. We've been in contact with the courts and the prison board, of course, and if we have an avenue to do it, we certainly want to do it, but at the same time, not at the risk of having an epidemic recreated within our population.
Or within the businesses in which they work.
Sure.
I mean, that's an exposure that they would have as well. So,
Thank you.
okay. Anything, so we'll just go right down, if you want to talk about your report or anything in supplement to that.
No corrections or additions to add at this time.
Okay.
I have nothing to add unless there's any questions.
Anything for either of those folks that are here or with regard to the information that was distributed? We good? Would you like to give anything additional to your report?
No, I'm
Sense of-
basically here to respond to questions that were raised, but as the warden has indicated, we are examining it on virtually a daily basis. We've been very fortunate in the facility that we do not have positive cases. We are offering vaccine clinics. I've held 2 so far. Unfortunately, we're seeing that the acceptance rate for the vaccine is hovering around 5%.
Wow.
So that is one of the concerns we have about restarting a work release. I would advocate when and if we open work release back up, that perhaps one of the conditions be that the individuals have to be vaccinated in order to participate, absent a physical limitation or religious belief as to why they cannot be vaccinated. I know restrictions are placed on other alternative court, like drug courts. They're required to submit the drug test, participate in 12-step programs. I believe a vaccination requirement would be reasonable to protect not only themselves, the community, as you point out, Mr. Chairman, but also all of the other individuals in the facility that they'll be coming back to.
Makes sense.
Can you just, for my own edification, I'm assuming have the contiguous counties to Lebanon?
We do.
And how are we faring in terms of our control of this pandemic or how have we fared in comparison?
Better than average. You did have a rough patch, but all 80 of our facilities had a rough patch. Some of them rougher than others, depending upon the density of the population. Also, with the seriousness with which the facility took recommendations about precautions. And here, we're very pleased that we have a great working relationship, and administration has followed our advice on masking and the like from the beginning. You have not been too quick to relax some of those restrictions given that lower vaccination rate. We have some counties that have said do away with all quarantine on intakes, do away with all masks, and we're seeing upticks, small little uprisings. One facility went back to work release, and we have a significant outbreak in that now. That isn't one of the contiguous counties. That's actually in another state.
You know, that's probably one of the best advantages we have. When you have 80 facilities, you have data.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you coming to this meeting. I know your time is spread pretty thinly, but I think it's very valuable when you can be here to give a first-hand account like that, so thank you.
Always appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Any other questions from the floor? If not,
I did have just one.
Yeah.
This is a little off kilter, but last year I participated in one of those true crime shows, and it was related to Bradley Martin and Carolyn King. And again, back to work release, they mentioned that when the night that Bradley Martin killed Guy Goodman, he had been let out of the prison on a 2-hour furlough, conjugal visit or whatever. And I'm just wondering, when work release is up and running, do good inmates or inmates in good standing, do they get that privilege?
No. Typically, a court will order a furlough for a funeral, if it's a medical procedure, something along those lines. That's not, I think that's old times and modern day, obviously because of things such as that happen. That's not something that happens.
Okay.
Good to know. All right, yes?
I just wanted to clarify, so my first question about the urine test, you don't do that?
I was actually gonna ask the warden, are we performing them for you?
No, so there's two different urine tests, like, so for example, if somebody is asked to provide a urine because it's part of the procedures of the institution to keep people honest, if we're taking random urine samples, we send those out to our own lab. If
Yeah.
medical's doing them for a medical testing, a medical reason, they do their own labs, and that's not something that we are probably sure. I don't know which one you were interested in.
The first one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We stand adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.